Welcome to Detailed, an original podcast by RCAT. This is the show where we uncover lessons learned to help you navigate your next project. I'm Cherise Lakeside, Senior Spec Writer at RDH Building Science, and your host. Have I got an episode for you today? My guests today are William Mandara Jr., AIA CEO and co-owner at Mancini Duffy, Joseph R. Levi, project manager from Pavarini McGovern, and J. Benjamin Alper, PESE, principal at Severud Associates Consulting Engineers. So basically, I have the architect, the construction manager, and the structural engineer to get their insight on this project. Bill Mandara is the Chief Executive Officer and co-owner of Mancini Duffy, a national design firm with a 100-year-plus history and tech-forward approach, based in New York City. Bill comes from a family that is in the business. His father and grandfather were general contractors. Throughout his career, Bill has believed in having consistency of vision and values, in that we should never put ourselves or our vision ahead of our clients, which I totally agree with. This consistency allows response to clients quickly, with clarity and authority. Joe Levi brings more than 20 years of experience to his role as construction project manager. He currently serves as a core and shell project manager at TSX Broadway in Times Square. Joe leverages his robust experience in development, implementation, and execution of programming and procedures, which has proven to generate both immediate and long-term results. His completed project experience includes mid-rise residential, commercial, industrial, high-rise hotel, federal, and institutional projects. Ben Alper joined Severud Associates in 2005 as an engineer and steadily progressed upward through the ranks, and in 2020 was promoted to associate principal. Throughout his career, Ben has taken on increasingly challenging projects such as the TSX Broadway redevelopment, the Weeksville Heritage Center in Brooklyn, and the LA Forum renovation in Inglewood, California. Outside of the office, Ben serves the structural engineering community as a member of the ASCE 726 Minimum Design Loads Committee, as well as its Seismic Loads Subcommittee. He is also active with NCSEA, NYC Buildings, and SEA ONY, where he is past director. Okay, if you didn't figure it out yet, with the bios that I just read, the project we are chatting about today is the absolutely incredible TSX Broadway in Times Square in New York City. At 550,000 total square feet, this is the largest project in Mancini Duffy's history, and they have been working on it for a total of 7 years. Developed by L&L Holding Company in partnership with Fortress Investment Group, the $2.5 billion 46-story mixed-use building is an extensive redevelopment of an existing building located at 1568 Broadway in the heart of Times Square. The vision behind TSX was to create an entertainment ecosystem, which consists of galleries, a one-of-a-kind outdoor stage that cantilevers out into Times Square, and notably, the first performer on that stage in July was Post Malone, and I missed it, I'm sad, a 150-seat backstage venue, the historic Palace Theater, a hospitality lounge that features the largest terrace in Times Square, an expansive wraparound exterior LED screen that provides the largest signage opportunity in Times Square, and that's saying something, a 669-key hotel with unobstructed views of Times Square that also includes what they call ball drop suites and exclusive entertainment suites. So what was the major challenge on this project, besides doing work in Times Square? To achieve more program opportunities, the team had to raise the historic 110-year-old Palace Theater 30 feet. Yep, I said it. An entire theater 30 feet into the air. Amazing. Now, let's get into the details. Hello and welcome to Detailed. Not only do I get to chat about a really, really, really cool project. Did I say really cool project today? But I have the honor of chatting with the architect, the construction manager, and the structural engineer. You know how much money and bribes I had to pay to get these guys here? So nobody's going to tell me this won't be an interesting conversation. Bill, Joe, and Ben, welcome to Detailed. How are you today?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Great. Thank you for having us.
I'm pretty excited to talk to you, especially since I warmed you up a little bit before we got started, and I know this is going to be a fun conversation. So everybody knows that listens to this that I like to start with an icebreaker question just to kind of get us all going, and it's different every time. Since there are two awesome portions of this project that are entertainment venues, I thought my question today would be, what has been your favorite live performance of any kind that you have ever seen? Joe, how about you go first?
Okay, I'll give it a start. I'd have to say, and this is an obvious one, obviously Post Malone performed live on the stage at the TSX Broadway Theater on the third floor. This is going back to the second week of July this year. And that was a surprise performance. It happened right on the stage, and basically the stage doors opened unbeknownst to many people. Some people knew about it, and he performed about 4 or 5 songs.
And you got to go?
And I got to go. I just happened to be there. Coincidentally, I came to work that day.
I'm pretty sure you did not call me, so I don't think we're friends anymore. See, that was over real quick. How about you, Bill?
That's it.
Too many to pick from, but I would say in the mid-90s, I was given tickets to see an unknown band at a small venue in the city with like 200-300 people, and it turned out it was actually the new Dave Grohl project called the Foo Fighters. Before their album even came out, my wife and I got to see them. They were dating at the time, but we got to see them before they even came out. They were playing cover songs. There was famous people in this club and everything, and it was pretty great. It was just an accident that we got to go there. So that was in the sea of hundreds of shows I've seen in my life. That one was pretty memorable.
Oh, extra jealous now, considering, which I mentioned to you before the show, I just got Foo Fighters tickets for next year, and I've never seen them.
I've seen them dozens of times. You'll be in for a great show.
Totally jealous. How about you, Ben?
This one's going to sound a little strange, but actually the Fresh Beat Band in the Beacon Theater, and I'll explain. It's one of these like kids TV shows. I don't know if they're even on the air anymore. But it was a special show because I took my daughter, and it was her first live show, and my wife and I love music, and it was just so great to like sort of expose her to that even at a young age. And it was also special because we had just finished renovating that theater a couple years before. So it was just sort of great to sort of have a chance to show my daughter our love of music and also be there in a theater we had just renovated. So it was sort of a special day.
I love that answer because I did the same thing raising my kids. Took them to Broadway shows or things like that because I wanted them to be very open-minded about music and art, and I took them to concerts, and watching them light up at their first experience like that. I took them to Kiss. They were all like, 12.
So did I. I took my 4-year-old son to Kiss at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, they were like 11, and in the 11-year-old range, took all 4 kids, and they just thought that was the coolest thing they'd ever seen in their lives.
Ben, you got to top that by taking her to the Sphere now to see you too.
I'm working on it.
You could take Bill to see that too, Ben.
You can talk after
I've seen you too a bunch of times, but never there.
It's for another conversation, but it's worthwhile.
Well, Bill has seen them and I have not, so I think Cherise should go and just send Bill an email and tell
Fair
him
enough.
what it was like. Okay, so let's get down to business. We are talking about TSX Broadway today. Mm-hmm. And there's so much going on here. I need you guys for hours. Let's start with a general broad overview of the major components of this project before we get into specific areas or specific technical details of the building. Tell me what all is going on here.
So it's obviously a hard project to distill down to into a few sentences, but the gist of it is that the Palace Theater existed with the DoubleTree Hotel um, years ago, well, before we started this project, as a traditional theater that you entered via Times Square. You entered in the lobby, and there was, the traditional area, and it took up this space in the middle in Times Square. What we did was through a series of different moves, we enabled for that theater to be raised 30 feet in the air, which involved, and again, it's really hard to distill this down, but it involved ostensibly scooping out a cellar and a subcellar, installing an elaborate jacking system along with a large concrete ring beam around the theater, and creating a pocket in which for that theater to go. At the same time, we demolished the old DoubleTree Hotel and built a new hotel on top of it. So that then created this space that was accessible from Times Square, in which you have retail space, you have, Joe mentioned the stage, you have all of this potential space out on Times Square now because the entrance to the hotel, both the hotel and the theater, are now on 47th Street. So by raising that theater up 30 feet in the air, we were able to install put a lobby that you enter on 47th Street that takes you up to the third floor, where there's more of a grand lobby, and the theater functions that way now. So that's really, really a very kind of basic description of the project. Years and years and years went into that.
It just sounds like such a simple thing to do right in the middle of Times Square.
Sure. It's easy. Yep. Just ask Joe. It's easy. It's not like, they had concrete trucks lined up almost across the entire crosstown length of Manhattan at one point in time.
Yeah, well, that was total sarcasm on my part. I know you know that. So I struggled with which area to start digging into for this bill. I've already written down my first rabbit hole question on a notepad next to me. I struggled with which area to start with first. But when I read that you had to lift that theater 30 feet in the middle of Times Square, I had to hear like all the dirty details about that. Because this isn't the first building I've talked about where they had to lift something like that up. But I just cannot. I've been to New York and I've been in Times Square. I cannot picture this and how you made this happen. So give me some details.
Well, I'll start and I'll let others jump in as we get to it.
Okay.
What we did is we have, the theater, if you think about it, is sort of a empty box, if you will. Heavy walls on the perimeter, right? The roof, all the roof loads go down to the perimeter walls, and then you have a base. So think about you kind of lifting a hollow box with most of the load around the perimeter. So what we did is we went in there, we put in these concrete ring beams, very stiff concrete beams, varying in depth from about 2 to 6 feet around the perimeter. And that made a very strong base to lift from, for something very stiff to lift from. The foundation and lift subcontractor, which Urban Foundations, led by Tony Mazzo, they came in and drilled these caissons into the ground. So kind of, if you would, like a hydraulic lift, sort of like you might have in a hydraulic elevator, mm-hmm. Right? There's sort of a plunger into the ground, and they built 34 of these, I'll call them plungers into the ground, that were pushed up underneath these concrete beams. And then when it came time to lift, we had 34 jacking mechanisms, set of 4 jacks per post, and each one of those jacks would lift, and we could lift in 6-inch increments, and that plunger would push up on the bottom of that concrete beam, and we would lift about 6 inches at a time. And then that, we'd do it and we'd repeat, and then just slowly but surely lifted it, between 4 and 6 inches at a time. I think, Joe, went pretty smooth, all things considered. I don't know.
I would say so. The building's still there. So, yeah.
Thankfully.
But if it wasn't, we wouldn't be on the podcast.
That would have sucked. We'd all be in a different room right now.
It makes really interesting noises when we lift. Like it has these little like pings and dings as the thing kind of rides up there, and you kind of get used to them. But it's still a little bit eerie. You kind of listen for the right noise.
Tell me again how old that theater is.
Just over 100 years old. Just over 100 years.
Yeah.
Oh dear Okay, go
So
ahead, Joseph.
No
it
problem.
was one of the original vaudeville theaters. It's actually I think Judy Garland is the one that made it famous. There's a stair within there actually called the Judy Garland stair. So it's a significant theater in the realm of Broadway.
Oh, going back to what Ben was talking about regarding the building the collar around the base of the theater, installing those lifting posts. Um, that's something that we started thinking about 4 years before the theater was even listed, and that design changed and was modified in varying degrees as we progressed, as we had a better understanding of access limitations and even underground utilities that need to be bypassed. Lifting posts had to be moved to allow for the high voltage Con Ed lines, which were actually going underneath the theater. So we need to make slight modifications. So we had something, a concept, 4 years ago. What ended up happening was very much different, if you ask me. But it's something that it, it was an evolution of a concept that took a long period of time to create, many meetings, a lot of time together just to understand everything that was going on. There were so many aspects in and around the theater that need to be modified to accommodate the theater lift too. So it wasn't happening in a silo. So many things were happening at any one time.
Right, and I think just to piggyback on that, I mean, before we would lift again, I know maybe I made it sound easy. Before we would do a lift, whether it be 2 or 3 feet in a day or just the first couple inches, there was a series of I don't Joe was like 10 or 12 of us, something like that, of different engineering firms and architecture firms and other consultants who had to walk into the theater, look at it, make sure if there was a little something, a reading here, a reading there, and look at it and just make sure that things looked right every time we lifted. So it really wasn't just
Yeah.
like it was collaboration in design, and then even during the process, you had a slew of people had to really get eyes on this thing, all doing different specific things.
Monitoring devices were everywhere, both measuring the stroke of the jacks, the movement of the theater, position of the theater, and vibrations on adjoining properties, on our property. The lift, like you said, it happened in 2 stages. There was the test lift, which we did just to understand if the jacks had actually moved, and then subsequently we had 2 phases of lift, which coincided with placement of permanent structure to help stabilize both the theater and the area around the theater.
I never want to write specs for a project like this. Just saying. So first rabbit hole question: what did staging and scheduling? I mean, I'm sorry, you cannot not be collaborative on a project like this, and you're in the middle of Times Square. We all know there's nowhere to put anything in New York, in the middle of the city. How complicated was staging and scheduling to get this project done?
I think staging and scheduling were probably one of the most difficult parts of this entire project because there was so many things going on at any one time. It wasn't just a theater lift. It was the demolition of the tower above the theater. It was stabilization of the existing structure. It was the excavation below the theater and below the west tower. Um, there were load transfers happening at existing columns to new structure, and then eventually you had new superstructure rising up through the ground while demolition was occurring. So if you could look at any one of those pieces and see how complicated they were, and if you put them all together, you really understand the level of complexity of this project. Um, Benny, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, and I think to your point, like things were going. There's 100 different things going on at the same time in different areas of the building, and Joe and his team, they'd look at us. They'd say, Mancini, Severud, we have accessibility here, and today we could actually work there, and that means we have to change this or change that, and then our teams would kind of whip it up and try to, even though we had these documents for 2 years sitting around, but because something became available to work on, so we would re-engineer, and the architects would redraw, and we'd do what we could to open up, because if Pavarini found a spot that they could work, they were going to work. So, and we had to facilitate that, and that's why we're all such good friends, because that was like we that went on for for the whole project.
Oh,
So
one of the more unique things about this project too is that the developer actually had a large field office a block away from the project, in which all the design team, construction team, the developer, everybody all coexisted in that facility 5 days a week, sometimes more than that. So rather than somebody from Joe's team sending an email out to my team and Ben's team, and then how things can get an email, it was literally just turning over to the person there, and that really give all the credit in the world to the developer for that, because it facilitated a lot of communication that went quicker and better than it would have, particularly on some other projects that everybody been separated. And one thing to just throw in there for funsies, in the middle of all this, you throw a global pandemic into the soup, that added for some other fun activities and challenges.
I'll tell you right now, I'm not kidding. I bow down to you guys. I am in awe looking at this project and knowing where you had to do it, dealing with the pandemic, how complicated everything is on 100-year-old and moving 100-year-old thing. All I could think is, I'm surprised it just didn't fall apart the minute you tried to move it an inch.
Well, there was years of protection. Yeah.
We didn't tell her. We didn't tell the theater we were moving her, so she didn't know.
Yeah.
We did nice and gentle and slow, so she couldn't tell.
I have to so behave right now. So next question. I'm going to get myself in trouble here. Okay, so there's another stage in this project, the Icon stage. And this is where that inaugural performance happened back in July with Post Malone that nobody invited me to. You're going to hear that through this entire podcast.
we actually didn't know about it. Sure.
So by the way, I wasn't even in town. I was down at the beach with my family on our little yearly down the shore trip. So I didn't even know it was happening until some of our team started texting me. I'm like, what is this?
I would have been in the car, Bill. In the car.
It's again. I'm a different vintage, so maybe if they had U2 or something there, I would have been more, or Metallica, I would have been more into it.
Okay, I understand. Tell me about this stage and when somebody's sending me tickets.
So it's interesting. Since then, I think the mayor of New York City actually had Diddy out there and then gave him the key to the city. So there's some. It's not necessarily where it's like it's. I think it's a surprise to everybody except a few people who are far more powerful and probably have way more money than any of us do. But the stage is really cool. So it is a stage that goes out to Times Square. The whole frontage of that portion of the building is all LED signage. And what happens is there's these custom doors. They were made for this project. These doors that are consisting of the LED sign that open inward to the building, and then there's the stage over there. So at any moment in time, you could be in Times Square looking up, and you see these doors kind of come in, and who knows what could be there. It's pretty cool. One of the challenges with that stage with this project really was the acoustic separation, because all kidding aside, there's a retail component in which you could have some very loud activities. You could have a Broadway show, and at the same time, you could have, some sort of concert out there. And everybody needs to make sure they all need to function independently. You can't have people who pay top dollar at a world-class theater to go see a Broadway show hearing boonk, 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 or whatever coming from the retail theater or God knows what from whatever could be going on the stage. So there is a tremendous amount of time, energy, and design and innovation that went into the acoustic separation of these different uses by the entire design team, quite frankly, and construction team. I mean, everybody really put their heads together on that.
And from a construction standpoint, a lot of things surrounding the stage had other levels of complexity in terms of the timing and sequencing for the installation of the LED sign. The entirety of the LED sign was completed before the hoist was even removed. So there was a time at which the hoist was actually passing behind the LED sign. And there were slab sections and permanent structure that wasn't completed by the time the LED sign was placed. So we had all of our hoist comebacks behind the LED sign. We were making crane picks, boom picks from the street over the LED sign into the job site to complete these hoist leave-out sections. So, like Bill said, you had this this extremely complicated LED sign, probably one of the largest, more complicated LED signs in the northeastern part of the United States, and then add to that the logistical complexity of installing that sign right in Times Square, and then doing the work behind it and in and around it out of sequence.
And one of the things that we didn't mention is that this project is not a new building. This project is an alteration, which meant that through all the things we just described and all the complexities of building a new hotel, putting the signage in, doing all of it in Times Square, and moving this theater and having a pocket for the theater to go to, we needed to keep 25% of the floor area of the existing building, of the actual slabs of the building. So the thing that Joe's talking about with hoist and taking things out, all the while we had to retain pieces of that existing building to keep this as an alteration, which was important because the original building was actually overbuilt. And if we were to take that whole thing down and start over again, we would lose all of that square footage, which I think it was about 50,000 square feet. And as you can imagine, it's pretty darn valuable. So that was just another added level of complexity for Joe's team in particular to just work through all of these things, where typically if you just blew everything out, you're like, whatever, we're just going to build this here or there. But feathering through all that stuff.
That's a genius way to make sure you don't lose that square feet.
It happens a lot, in particular in New York City. And, when you have that much potential money, or should I say value of that floor area at stake, it's worth the effort.
Well, and that's the kind of thing, like, I don't think I've ever heard in my, little Portland, Oregon over here, ever heard anybody say something like that on a project. But, it's interesting how different things can be when you're in such a populated area. I mean, how did you function just with all the people that are always in Times Square? I mean, that's right there. That had to be some kind of issue with all the things you had going on. And
so the onset of the project, the first phases were obviously the demolition and the excavation. So we had the demolition coming out one location of the building and the excavation coming out another window of the building on 47th Street. Eventually that changed and we moved a little bit to 7th Avenue. I'm not going to boggle you down with the details of how we got in and out of the building. But obviously, considering the geographic location and that it's the busiest intersection in the northern hemisphere, at least the United States, you have to contend with people. COVID obviously, emptied the city out. So we, in certain respects, that helped us with moving material and debris in and out of the building. But in other respects, it hurt us. We were, obviously manpower, the COVID requirements and restrictions that were imposed. Eventually, once the city started filling back in, it started trickling a little bit slower than you would have expected. And by the time the city got to full capacity, I would say we were almost completed or topped out with the project. But nevertheless, you are still contending with massive amounts of people crossing sidewalks. Right. It's you got to protect the people. That's what we do here in New York City. Sidewalk sheds, crossing guards. The most difficult thing I would say that you have to contend with, really, with respect to New York City, is the movement of traffic, scheduling of concrete trucks, debris removal. But that's typical for New York City. I would say it's a little bit accentuated here, it being in Times Square, and the amount of time that trucks had to, pass in and out through, the tunnels to get to the city.
Well, you had to wait for Elmo and the naked cowboy to get out of the way to start.
That's right.
Thanks, Ron.
Oh, I wish I would have known about this project a lot sooner, because I would have loved to come and seen this all in action. Mm-hmm. So I read through, I went and trolled this project in a number of different places online and read through all the information that you sent me. There was a whole section in one of the sheets that you sent me on technology. Some really cool stuff going on in this building with technology. Tell me about that. It's everywhere.
So I think, when I think of construction technology, I think of a few different things. One of them, in construction technology could be the post-tension strands, which are used in a different way than, you know, ever, and Benny can speak to that. Other technology would be the LED nodes. There's some 1900 LED nodes which are strewn around the facade of the building. There was other technology in the sense that we used monitoring devices in the concrete to monitor temperature and strength. Um, I mean, we could add any one of those, but Benny, maybe you want to touch upon the
We can
post-tension
touch on
structure?
both of them. I mean, all the LED and stuff in the buildings and some of the
I
construction
mean,
technology.
the LED pucks, as we called them, I mean, we had so many of us, and we had several mock-ups in varying places on the eastern seaboard over the years in which this whole technology was developed because it didn't exist. I think early on, it was anything from just kind of random lights that were put in there, and then it was getting that. So A, it's weather tight. B, so somebody could go up there and service them, replace them, and then getting that technology to talk to each other. It hadn't been done before. So that was developed with with the entire design team and construction team, along with the curtain wall subcontractor as well, because it just didn't exist before. And I was actually out to dinner with my wife a few weeks ago, and we were in a cab going down the road, and I was just like, "Look at that!" And you see it; it actually is quite striking because it goes all the way up the building.
Ben, you want to tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about the construction technology?
Yeah, so what Joe's talking about is our above the theater to get this, where there's an existing transfer structure that when we were lifting the theater was going to be in the way. So there was this existing 135-foot long, I'm going to call it bridge for lack of a better term, maybe you want to call it tabletop. But it's a bridge sitting on four columns and it held the existing tower. And as we needed to lift the theater up, we needed to get it out of the way. So we built a concrete box girder. It's three beams looped together, 44 foot deep, about 135 feet long, and we have these post tension strands. We couldn't find post tension strands in the U.S. that were large enough, so we had to bring them in from overseas. We got, I believe, is the largest jack that they have in the U.S. Joe, right? They had to get two of them, special for our job, specially calibrated, and
It's actually
they.
from Europe.
Oh, the jack came from Europe. Okay, yeah, I thought it
Came
was
from Europe.
came from Europe. We brought it from overseas, and yeah, and we basically just think of them like these sort of like deep bridge strands, and they pulled post tension them on the end, it was a sort of a unique usage of it. Again, sort of like a bridge up in the air, and you don't see it, but it structurally it's sort of interesting for us, and it was a good usage. They talk about the accessibility of the site, trying to do that in structural steel. Was going to be very difficult, trying to find area to lay down, bolt up. But because of just it was strands and concrete, the concrete gets pumped and the strands just get placed. They kind of come in a spool. So it was sort of an easy way to build it. We had looked at many ways along the years how to build these transfers, and that ended up being I'd say the easiest construction wise. What did it save us? Like 2 months of construction or something like that, Joe. Something
It did.
pretty
It did.
substantial.
It had both to do with the schedule and a cost related issue. So the uh, the research that we did on the post tension to steel girder was done early on in the project, probably about 2 years before we even started. When one day I think Kowsey from Severud sat down with Benny and came up with Benny and I think Eric McGovern. He wrote on a piece of paper to Eric, I think I want to do this with post tension cables, and from there it turned into a number of different pricing exercises, which have eventually turned into the gird that we see there today. But as Benny was referring to, it's unlike any other box girder that I think has ever been built. As a matter of fact, Structural Technologies has indicated that it's probably the highest and tallest post tension girder in the northeastern part of the United States, it being obviously over 100 feet in the air, and there's over 210,000 lineal feet of post tension cable in this girder, 36 tendons. 12 each girder, 5,300 lineal feet of plastic ducts, which contain all these strands, which were tensioned to over 2 million pounds of force, using this jack, which was transported from Europe to the United States and calibrated actually Lehigh University using the the largest jack calibration machine that exists in the United States. So it's extremely unique. What we did was unique. From everything from the cables to the end locks, it's nothing like you've ever seen before in post tension.
Yeah. In fact, we just because of the concrete heat and all the different pieces that had to go in, we actually built a piece of it in a yard in New Jersey before we built the building, right? Just because you had to look at it and make sure everything was going to fit and things were going to work out right. So we actually built what was it? It was like, I think it was 8 foot by 8 foot by like 4.5 feet deep, so something like that.
Right.
Piece with the conduits for the strands and the rebar, and we built like the heaviest section, the most congested section, and we built it and we poured the concrete and we we monitored it and we tested it just to make sure that when we got there to do the real thing that we would be in good shape.
I don't recall anybody ever describing. Is this like, has it been done before? I don't recall anybody ever describing something like that to me before. It sounds very innovative.
I think it is. Post tensioning is is a fairly common technique, but doing it with girders of that height and that size is not very. It is unique. It's different. We also did something where we staged the post tensioning. So meaning we built 10 floors of load, and then we came in and pulled the strands, and we built 10 more floors of load and pulled the strands. And what that does is it sort of, as you pull the strand, it kind of forces the girder up. So as the beam, let's call it a beam for a second, as the beam sort of naturally deflects and comes down, then you pull the strands and it kind of pops it back up. So you really don't get very much net movement, right? As it deflects a little bit, it comes right back up. So it worked really well in terms of us making the building, even though the building's sitting on a 135 foot long girder, it just kind of is still, I mean, by the time they were done, it was basically stick straight, which is, rare for something that long.
I don't think we give our structural engineers anywhere near enough credit.
I would agree.
Because math is hard. Let's talk.
For architects.
I know why I wasn't going to say it. Okay. Out of respect for you, Bill, but you threw it out there. So.
You should see me trying to leave a tip after a meal.
You should see me trying to leave a tip after a meal.
Well, architects don't read their emails either, which is why it's really good you all worked in the same place. Let's talk about the hotel a little bit. I read something that called it a lifestyle hotel. What does that mean? Tell me what this hotel is all about.
I mean, it's an. I hear the word lifestyle thrown out. I'll tell you, it is a new brand.
I'll tell you, it is a new brand by Hilton called Tempo. Last week they had the opening party for it. It's pretty amazing.
What's really cool about the
hotel, I would say, which just makes it unique, is that there's rooms along the one corner of the building that they call the ball drop rooms, in which you look out and you just see right down where the ball drops in Times Square.
I would imagine those rooms will be fetching
a pretty penny
for years to come. But
this year,
I think the hotel has a lot of really cool features.
I think the hotel has a lot of really cool features. Has a great lobby, event space. Those rooms are what really
it is actually the first,
and it is actually the first
Tempo brand for
Tempo brand for Hilton. I think there's a couple other than planned, but this is the first one.
Sounds like this whole complex has a lot of different things going on. Of course, I know I will never ever get to stay in one of those ball drop rooms, but it sounds pretty incredible.
So lifestyle hotels are about being authentic. It's a come out as you are approach to hospitality. Exciting food, beverage experiences. It's sensory driven. I go to a lot of hotels, so I know this. It's very much sensory driven. Sounds, smells. I don't know if you've ever been to, like the One Hotel or other hotels. Sometimes you walk in and you could smell. There's fragrances now. Hotels have their own fragrances that you smell as you go in, and some people even buy them. That's just part of the sensory driven. Even the lighting program plays into it. Loud music, they're more electric. If you have tattoos, they want you to roll up your sleeve and show your tattoos. If you have purple hair, wear your hair out. That's a lifestyle hotel.
I like it. If I go there, I'll show them my tattoos. So the stats say there are 51,000 square feet of total signage in this project, including the exterior LED signage that's across the facade. Most of us don't get to work with something like that. What are some of the things you have to think about if I came to you tomorrow and said, I'm going to, nobody wants me to design a building, but I'm going to design this big building and I want to do this on the outside. And what advice could you give me so I don't completely screw this up?
I mean, I'm going to defer to Joe on some of this stuff, but my first question to you would be, where is the building? Because what's super important to consider here is that it is in Times Square, and the zoning for Times Square does require a certain amount of signage, and because of that, it allows you to do certain things. Like in some instances, the signage is outboard of the building a bit. It gives you options to potentially occupy some of that space in there and different things. So the big thing is, like, there's not a lot of places, I would imagine, where signs of this stature are allowed. So that would be my first question: is how are the local authorities and people going to look upon this?
I think going back to what Bill was talking about before when you started this conversation, understanding the acoustics and how that plays into the space. When you're looking from the street at the LED sign, directly behind the LED sign, you're going to have your retail space. And directly behind that retail space is actually the theater spaces. So understanding how sound is being transmitted, obviously, from the street through that sign and into the entertainment space or the retail space, and then into the theater. I'm sure Mancini Duffy spent a lot of time understanding that, because they introduced a number of acoustical provisions to, I guess, mitigate any noise that was coming from the street.
Yeah, it's completely separated from each other.
Yeah. So what you have is a series of not just acoustical partitions that were introduced. We have acoustical slabs that come into play. So in some of the retail spaces, you'll have acoustical slabs going from the 8th floor down. So that once there is a retail tenant, any vibrations or sound transmissions are mitigated by the acoustical slab. And right adjoining that, retail space is, obviously your theater space on one side, and we have acoustical walls and partitions extending up and down all around and surrounding the theater.
Yeah, I mean, to that end, the vibration is really potentially even more important to separate than the actual sound, because that's where it transfers really. So all the things Joe was describing, and we worked with Ben's team as well to separate those things was super important to get that right.
I can only imagine what the wall assemblies look like. Like, can you send me a drawing? I want to see all the different pieces and parts inside these walls and how. I mean, in like you said, somewhere else, some of the things you had to worry about here might not be. Of course, somewhere else probably isn't going to let you put up a building that's a big sign.
Yeah, I don't know. I would imagine there's places. But
well, Vegas.
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 Potentially Tokyo.
Tokyo, right?
Okay, so this might be a stupid question, but I'm not afraid to ask stupid questions. What, and I'd like to ask all three of you this, because it might be different. What would you say the single most difficult thing was to either design or build, from your individual perspectives of what you do in this project? What was the hardest thing, and what did you learn from it? Sorry, part two of that question.
I think I said it before. There was so many different things that were going on at any one time on this project, from the stabilization of the tower during demolition, the installation of new concrete superstructure from the subcellar up, excavation of the cellar below the theater and below the west tower. I mean, I could go on and on for probably about 10 minutes just talking about all the bits and components. And if I think about it, they're all so, they're all so very difficult. And it's hard to pull any one part or piece and say that was probably the most difficult part of this project. I think the most difficult part of this project in many ways was just trying to get all these pieces working together within the confines of the schedule, and being able to move uninhibited. That's probably in my opinion, Ben maybe can spell it differently or see it a different way, but I think the most highest level of complexity was pulling all the pieces together.
I'm going to give a similar answer. I feel like I just cheated on you on the cheated from you on the test. Yeah. I mean, all the things that we did, and there are there's 3 or 4 things on this job that from a design perspective were incredibly complicated and unique usages of different things. But at the end of the day, it's just math and science and their basic principles. And yes, we found really creative, unique ways to apply and do things that we've done in either other projects or in smaller ways. But even though with the technology, nothing was really, we created things from things that were already there. But trying to put the pieces together and doing it with you see 3 of us here representing 3 firms, but I don't remember the number. There's a huge number of firms that were involved on the on the construction side, but on the architecture side, on the engineering side, we had like a dozen different engineers doing different things, from sign to engineers designing the sign, and a theater lift engineer, and someone else doing supports of excavation, and someone doing the means and methods engineering. Just a whole slew of different people doing different things, and just trying to. For us as engineer of record for the project, and Kaz Gina, our principal, is the one signing on everything effectively. It was about just making sure that we had all the pieces together, that there was no gaps, and that sort of everything worked together. And that, like Joe's saying, he's talking about from the build side. I'm talking about from the design side. It's just a lot of people and a lot of moving parts and a lot of different consultants. And like Bill as AOR and us as EOR, just trying to make sure we got everything and they work together, and that was just extremely challenging.
I agree with all of it. I would add in there architecturally, there was a lot of things that were challenging, but I would say the most difficult thing that I saw or participated in was the vertical circulation of the building. Egressing people from the 49th floor of a hotel down through a building that has all these different and sometimes, conflicting type of uses was a challenge. We by way of example, you couldn't have somebody exiting their hotel room, going into a stair with, their bathrobe with purple hair, and then walking into a Broadway show from the same stairway. So separating all of that circulation, keeping, and filtering, getting people to circulate through that building, and most importantly,
was really a challenge. And we really,
was really a challenge, and we really,
collectively all came up with a lot of in many cases it involved fitting things in places where, the conversation where, the conversation with Ben literally shave like half an inch so we could fit a stair in here.
So we could fit a stair in here.
In the spirit of this project, the answer was always yes, we'll figure it out. The vertical circulation in this building,
because of the different
separation, and
because of the separation, and because of
people exiting a theater at the same time.
The sheer quantity of people was quite a challenge, and we're super proud of our team and all the entire team for being able to figure it out and satisfy all of those different
concerns of the
needs and
various stakeholders of
the building.
One of my favorite questions, and I always rephrase it a little differently every time, but I try to sneak this one into every interview I do. Designing something is one thing, but once the construction side is going to cheer for me a little bit when I say this, but building it is sometimes another. I think we all learn from regardless of our discipline, from every project we work on. And you get out there and you had all the best intentions. You get out there, maybe it's not going to quite, because of something else going on, not quite going to come together. But I think that there's, for everybody, there's a lesson learned from the construction phase of any project that you take to your next project and do something differently than how you did it prior to that lesson. I know a project like this only had continual lessons. You don't have any choice with a project like this and so many moving parts in an old building. Tell me about one lesson that you learned that will change what you do in the next building going forward from this project. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's anything anybody did wrong, but you have problems to solve. What was something that you learned from this project? Who wants to go first?
I mean, I'll go. I just think the collaborative nature of this project was outstanding, and the way that every time something came up, because we did a set of drawings. To your point, we did drawings, we did Revit model, all this good stuff, and until you actually get into it, things tend to surface. And I think the collaborative nature in which the problems were solved was something that I hadn't necessarily seen on this level yet in my career, and I think it was something that I'd like to obviously see carried forward on future work.
I love that lesson. How about you, Ben?
Yeah, I think we did a lot of things really well. I mean, the one thing that I feel like when we didn't understand this thing when we started it. Like, I mean, I think we pretend like we did, but we didn't really understand what this was and how exactly the pieces are going to fit together. I do wish we had early on done a better job, sort of, because like I said, we had so many consultants and so many different things. We probably could have done a better job, now that I look back, defining on who does exactly what. Because there would be times where we'd say, okay, is this yours? Is that mine? And we work it out. But and again, probably we couldn't have done it then. We couldn't have figured it out in the beginning. But now that looking back on it, and we see sort of like, oh, well, we should have decided up front that this engineer has this piece, or this is temporary and this is permanent. And there's a lot of that. We did a really good job of taking structure that was needed for temporary things and making it permanent. But then you had these sort of like things where it's sort of like the means and methods engineer designed it, and then we designed it, and who's detailing it and who's drawing as it go on. And probably we, going forward, I think we would start earlier and really actually sit out and just write it out and have it like on a piece of paper or a board or somewhere, just to like sort of know it going forward, and especially on something that unique. I think going forward we try to do that.
Well, that's a great lesson too, because I mean, and like you said, you might not have known those questions to ask. Those are the kinds of things we learn. We learn something new from every project. But now you have a good idea. You do another complicated project like this, and that having that knowledge now is going to help the next one go just all that much smoother.
Right. The next time we lift a theater 30 feet, we know exactly how to.
Next time we're going to do it 40 feet, though.
You never know, especially in New York. How about you, Joseph? Joe?
I would say lessons learned. If I were to go back, plan your vacations very well, and always select the ability to get a full refund, because you may have to cancel it and stay on site as a. But we all sacrificed a lot for this project. I remember there were times when Benny was on vacation in Israel, and he'd be calling up. It was 8 o'clock in the morning here, and I don't know what time it was there. But we all made a lot of sacrifices, and when you go onto a project like this, I think you have to be willing to take a little bit of a sacrifice, because at the end there's going to be a huge reward. But Bill, we've all had our bumps and bruises, but we made it through it. So
exactly.
Sometimes you just need to get your skin thick and just push forward, and you'll get to the end.
I think everybody's collective significant others who worked on this project probably deserve a little something.
That's for sure.
I know my wife does.
Yeah.
I was going to ask how many people had cots in that collaborative working space, and how many people had a drinking problem by the time this project was done.
No comment on the latter.
we had one concrete pour that went on for, I don't know, it was like the morning was the rebar inspection, and then the concrete pours at night. And our inspector Megan, she had been there already for like, I don't know, I probably shouldn't say this. She'd been there for some ridiculous number of hours, and I sent someone there to relieve her so she could go get sleep for a couple hours in the hotel. And I couldn't get her to go. She's like, no, I'm staying here. I said, you're gonna be up for 25 hours. I'm staying. I said, no, wait. I'm sending another engineer there. And if you want to stay, I can't force you to leave, but I'm sending you someone else. It's like, but that's the dedication. Every firm had, we had people like that just like, they lived and this was again during the pandemic. So there were people, there was, some I won't say risk. It wasn't risk, but there were complications, and people really pushed through. All of our teams really worked hard.
I'll leave you with this one statistic. So over the course of the project, Benny told you there was over 70 consultants, I think, at one point, or 50 consultants, 50 plus, let's just say. I think we're over 100 people who have gone through our doors, either project managers, engineers, you name it.
Hey, another way of looking at it, both of my kids were in middle school when the project started, and they're both in college right now. So
it's projects of that complexity take a lot of time. But if I would have been Megan, I would have told you to pound sand. If I had worked that many hours to get to a certain point, and then you tell me to go home when I want to see it finished.
She was loving it. She loved it. So
yeah.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah. It was hard when she came off that project to go to the next one. She's just like, it was like we sent her to like a, but by anyone else's standard, the next building she went to is a nice sized project, and but she's looked at, she's like, it doesn't nowhere near anywhere as complex as what I was doing. This is like easy, like a joke. She put her heart and soul into it. So
that lady got some of the most valuable experience of her life on this job. That will serve her well, but just tell her I said go, Megan. What each one of you, Jess, what is your favorite spot in this project? Finished, it's all done. What is your favorite? Pick one favorite spot. You can love all of it, but pick one favorite spot.
Okay, I'll go first. I actually love the standing under the theater itself, because when we actually lifted it, right, I think Joe talked about it briefly, the technology, we had all this monitoring set up, but we had a computer screen where we could just watch all the sensors. But the screen was with everything else, right, under the theater. So as we're standing under the theater and we're lifting, this thing over our heads, that's where all the action was. So it's still for me like sort of nostalgic to stand there under the theater and think about us, having this like really heavy building moving above our heads, standing there watching these like monitors to make sure the tilt was exactly right. So I like standing under the theater.
Well, the attention hungry musician in me loves the stage and would kill to be standing over there with a Les Paul and a big old Marshall stack behind me. So I guess I'll go with the stage.
I totally knew you were going to say that, by the way.
Yeah, it's kind of
that's interesting. That's a good pick. My favorite part of the structure is actually right underneath the underside, in the middle of the box girder, because it reminds me of everything that really came before that point and everything that happened after. All the time and energy that we spent getting up there, and then obviously seeing it through to fruition. So standing in the middle there just really puts everything into perspective for me.
I so have to figure out a way to finagle my way to New York so I can come see this project now, because it's just insane. Mm-hmm. I like to close out each episode. I have usually 2 questions, one more broad industry question, and then my final question. And we kind of talked about this a little bit, but not exactly. What would be your biggest piece of advice that you would give to a firm taking on such a large even if it wasn't like this project, but just such a large, multifaceted and difficult project as this one? What could they do from day one to make that process go more smoothly that they might not instinctively know?
I mean, I can, it was kind of alluded to before. I think Joe made the joke about not planning vacation time, but I think that having some, having some empathy for your staff that's working on this and the people. I mean, we've mentioned some folks, and we have so many folks here, like in particular this guy, John McCampbell, who was on it from day one and is still here. The amount of effort required by people and the amount of, quite frankly, the toll it can take on people's personal lives being on a project like this, trying to have some empathy for them and making sure that, being honest with people that this is what you're getting into. This is, this is probably going to be the coolest project you've ever worked on. But it's not going to be always an easy or fun process. During COVID, when everybody else was sitting in their basement, we had people coming into the city every day working on this project. We had a lot of people, and really good people, unfortunately, who worked for periods of time on this project and, tapped out at some point. So it was just too much. So it's, I think it's really just kind of the human element of it, and how recognizing and trying to have some level of empathy or trying to plan for I don't want to say toll because it's such a negative connotation, but it is, it's a lot. It's a lot for somebody to work on a project like this.
I think that's great advice. So people don't always remember to think or talk about the people. Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's all materials in a pile. It doesn't happen without the people.
Right. And listen, full disclosure, I could have probably done a better job of that over the years. So.
Well, we all learn.
There you go.
Anybody else have anything to add?
I think Bill said it pretty well. I agree with him.
He said it pretty well. I mean, he's 100% right. It's all about the people and how much time and effort and everything they gave into it, and that's what makes us sit here and look really good because they did all the hard work. And
absolutely.
So it's
well, hopefully they all got really great bonuses. Everybody just dead silence.
Next question.
Yeah. So final question. Everybody gets this question. I've rephrased it a little bit over time because I was having a hard time having people truly understand what I was trying to ask. So we all, as individuals, we hope that our involvement in this life will in some way make the world a better place, personally or professionally, or make an impact on those around us. For me, I call that mission, my personal world domination statement. How am I going to dominate my world and do my best in my world? So, personal or professional, how do you as an individual hope to make your mark on this world? What is your world domination statement? Crickets.
I'll go first then.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
I'll go first. I'll take it from the professional side. I'd say that I'm only here because like Kazu Gina is the engineer of record, but he, I started working here, it was 20 years ago under him and other great partners, and I'm only here because of what they gave to me, and they really, pushed me along when I needed it, and they. I am here because of them, and I try to pay it forward and sort of help out the next generation. And I think that's I'm thankful for everything that everyone's given me, and I just try to pay it forward and try to like Bill talked all about the people and just like to try to enrich them the way I've been enriched over all these years.
And Bill knows, I think we talked about this last time. I love that answer. I do a lot of mentoring and teaching of younger professionals for the same reason, because I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for some mentors that I had. And I don't know that there could be any more valuable thing you can do professionally to bring those up behind you.
I'm going to tell you bits and pieces of what we just talked about. Obviously applying strategic thinking, planning, effective people management, dedicating yourself to high quality construction standards that shape and eventually improve the world around us. That's what, it would be mine. And I think it grew as I've been on this project and been surrounded by great people like Bill, Benny, and all the other people that I've worked with over the years. So I've learned a lot from them. And it's made me a better person, and I'm thankful for that. It's good.
Okay, Bill, bring us home.
Well, obviously, I agree with everything everybody said. I mean, I would, I guess, go a little bit differently because, I tend to meld professional, personal, everything all into one thing because I guess I just am who I am. And I would go with the old Popeye thing that, you are who you are. And I think that there's so many people in our industry that either put on airs or like to, act as they're smarter than they are and everything. I think it's okay to just be yourself. And, if you don't know something, if you work with somebody who, if I'm fortunate enough to work like somebody like with the folks like Benji and Joe and the folks on this team and, learn from them and don't be afraid to ask questions and don't let your ego get in the way of that. There's enough people here that do that. And if we all put our egos aside and just be ourselves, we can probably do some pretty great things.
Oh, it's amazing when you throw that ego out the door and you bring the authenticity in the room and you just get real with each other and accept everybody for being the individuals they are how much more work and better work gets done in the first place.
Right on.
It's an amazing experience. Gentlemen, this has been so much fun. It's like I want to just sit and talk to you guys for hours, but I know that you have lives and you can't hang out with me, and I'm still kind of mad at you for me not getting to go to Post Malone, even though some of you didn't even know me yet. I really appreciate you being here today and taking time to tell me about this great project. I promise I'm visiting next time I go to New York. It's going to be the first place I go. Thank you.
All right. Don't eat in Times Square though. Other than this building, there's lots of good restaurants we can tell you about.
Okay, I will.
Stay
if
away
I'm
from
coming
the
there,
tourist traps. Stay away
I'll
from
call
the
you.
tourist
Where
traps.
do I go eat? Tell me where to go eat. Thank you again, guys.
Thank you, Cherise.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.